wake up, reach for your phone, and before your feet touch the floor, your mind is already somewhere else. A message, a headline, a short video, another short video, a stranger's opinion, a crisis in another country, a joke you forget 5 seconds later, a perfect morning routine performed by someone whose life seems cleaner, richer, calmer, and more meaningful than yours. By the time you finally stand up, nothing has happened, yet you already feel tired. The room is quiet, but your mind is crowded. You make coffee and open another screen. You eat while watching something. You walk while listening to something. You work with several tabs open, your phone beside you, and a low-level feeling that there might be something more interesting just one click away. Then something strange begins to happen. The things you once enjoyed start feeling flat. A movie feels too slow. A book cannot hold you. A conversation takes too long to become interesting. A walk feels empty without music. Cooking feels like wasted time unless a video is playing in the background. Even rest starts to feel uncomfortable unless it contains stimulation. You may call this boredom. You may call it laziness. You may worry that you have lost your personality, your discipline, or your ability to enjoy life. You may say, nothing feels exciting anymore. But perhaps your life has not become empty. Perhaps your attention has become so crowded that ordinary experience can no longer reach you. That distinction matters. Because if life itself is the problem, then you need a different life. But if your mind has become overstimulated, fragmented, and constantly interrupted, then the path forward is not to chase stronger excitement. It is to recover your sensitivity to what is already here. This is not a story about technology being evil. It is not a lecture about throwing your phone away, disappearing into the mountains, or becoming a perfectly disciplined person who wakes at 5 in the morning and never watches entertainment. Technology can connect, educate, comfort, and create. The problem is not that stimulation exists. The problem is that there is almost no space left between one stimulus and the next. Your brain has not failed you. It has adapted to the environment you repeatedly give it. If the environment is fast, bright, emotional, unpredictable, and endless, your attention learns to expect speed, intensity, novelty, and constant change. Then the ordinary pace of real life can begin to feel like absence. A real conversation has pauses. A real skill takes months. A real relationship develops through repetition. A real body changes slowly. A real career contains long stretches in which nothing dramatic happens. A real morning does not arrive with music, captions, edits, and perfect lighting. It simply begins. The more your mind is trained by compressed experience, the harder uncompressed life can feel. A 30-second video can contain more visual changes, emotional shifts, information, and surprise than an ordinary half hour. After enough exposure, silence may feel like emptiness, patience may feel like punishment, and gradual progress may feel like no progress at all. This is why you can spend hours consuming things that are designed to be interesting and still end the day feeling strangely untouched. Your eyes were occupied, your ears were occupied, your mind was activated. But activation is not the same as satisfaction. Stimulation gives you something to respond to. Satisfaction requires you to participate. It asks you to remain present long enough for an experience to deepen. That is difficult when your attention has learned that the next thing is always available.
You are not bored because nothing exists.
You may be bored because your mind no longer has time to enter what exists. You touch the surface of 100 experiences and wonder why none of them feel meaningful. Meaning rarely appears on the surface. It forms through continuity. You stay with a thought long enough to understand it. You stay with a person long enough to know them. You stay with a task long enough to become capable. You stay with discomfort long enough for it to change shape. But a mind trained to escape the first second of discomfort never reaches the part where depth begins. The moment attention drops, the hand moves, the phone opens, the video changes, the music starts. The feeling disappears before you can identify it. So the question is not simply, why am I bored? The deeper question is, what happens inside me when nothing is immediately demanding my attention? Do you feel restless, lonely, anxious, inadequate, empty, behind? Do you suddenly remember tasks you have avoided, decisions you have delayed, or emotions you have been covering with noise? Sometimes overstimulation is not only the cause of discomfort, it is also the escape from discomfort. You keep feeding the mind because you are afraid of what becomes audible when the feeding stops. That is why change requires more than deleting an application. The application may be the habit, but the habit is often protecting you from something. The real work is learning to remain with your own life without constantly needing to leave it. Think about the first 10 minutes of your day, not the ideal version, the real one. Before you have chosen a thought, the world begins choosing thoughts for you. Notifications tell you what deserves urgency. News tells you what deserves fear. Social media tells you what deserves comparison. Messages tell you who needs access to you. Algorithms tell you what should capture your interest. This matters because attention is not only what you look at. Attention is the process through which reality becomes psychologically important. What you repeatedly attend to begins shaping what feels relevant, threatening, desirable, and normal. If the first emotional experience of your morning is comparison, your own day may feel insufficient before it begins. If it is outrage, your nervous system may enter a state of conflict while you are still in bed. If it is novelty, slower tasks may already feel weak by contrast. Then you wonder why opening a document feels impossible. The document is not flashing. It does not know exactly what keeps you watching. It does not offer a new reward every few seconds. It asks you to create structure rather than receive it. Creation feels heavier than consumption because creation requires direction. You must decide what matters, tolerate uncertainty, and remain through periods when the work is not yet good. Consumption offers a ready-made stream. It removes the burden of choosing while quietly consuming the ability to choose. This is why you may spend an hour searching for something to watch and finish less rested than when you began. You were not resting. You were repeatedly evaluating options. Open this, reject that, check the comments, search again, skip ahead, look for something better. The body may be still, but the attention is performing hundreds of small movements. Those movements have a cost. Not a dramatic cost that you notice immediately, but a gradual one. By evening, your mind feels full, yet you cannot remember what filled it. This is one of the strangest features of modern overstimulation: high input and low memory. You take in enormous amounts of material, but very little becomes part of you. The information passes through without integration. Integration needs pauses. The mind needs moments when nothing new arrives, so it can connect what has already arrived. A thought develops while you walk. A feeling becomes clear while you shower. A solution appears after you stop forcing it. A memory becomes meaningful when you sit with it. When every empty moment is filled, the mind loses its natural processing time. You may interpret the result as mental fog, lack of creativity, or weak concentration. But sometimes the mind is not empty. It is overcrowded and unfinished. Imagine inviting hundreds of people into a small room and then asking why you cannot hear your own voice. The solution is not to speak louder. The solution is to let the room clear. Yet silence can initially feel worse. When stimulation decreases, you may not feel peaceful. You may feel irritated. Time may move slowly. You may become aware of a persistent desire to check something. This is not evidence that silence is bad for you. It is evidence of how strongly your attention has been conditioned. The checking reflex is rarely a conscious decision. Your hand reaches before your mind gives permission. You unlock the phone without knowing what you wanted. You move between the same few applications, find nothing, close them, and reopen them minutes later. This behavior is not proof that you are stupid or weak. It is a learned loop. A cue appears: boredom, effort, uncertainty, loneliness, a difficult sentence, a pause in conversation. The response is checking. The checking produces a small possibility of novelty, connection, relief, or surprise. Not every check is rewarding. That unpredictability can make the behavior stronger. Perhaps there is a message. Perhaps there is something funny. Perhaps something has changed. The possibility keeps the loop alive. Eventually, you stop checking because something interesting happened. You check to escape the moment in which nothing happened. You are no longer seeking information. You are avoiding stillness. This changes how you experience work. Deep work begins with a period of resistance. Reading begins with adjustment. Exercise begins before the body feels good. Creativity begins before you know what you are making. If you escape during that first period, you never reach absorption. Then you conclude that you cannot focus. But perhaps your focus is not absent. Perhaps it is never given enough uninterrupted time to arrive. Concentration is often treated like a switch. Either you have it or you do not. In reality, concentration is more like entering water. At first, you notice the temperature. You remain self-conscious. Your thoughts wander. Then gradually, the activity begins holding you. Constant interruption keeps you standing at the edge. You enter for 30 seconds, leave, enter again, and blame the water for never becoming comfortable. The same pattern affects pleasure. Pleasure often deepens after attention stabilizes. The first bite is not the entire meal. The first page is not the book. The first 10 minutes are not the walk. But overstimulation teaches the mind to judge too quickly. Does this excite me immediately? Is this worth continuing? Is there something better? The constant evaluation prevents surrender, and surrender is often necessary for enjoyment. You cannot fully enjoy an experience while simultaneously asking whether another experience would be better. Comparison breaks contact. The body is here, but the mind is browsing alternatives. That may be why your free time feels strangely thin. You are not inside it. You are reviewing it from a distance, measuring it against all the other ways you could be spending it. A simple evening becomes disappointing because it does not look memorable. A meal feels ordinary because it is not photographed. A quiet weekend feels wasted because someone else appears to be traveling. Your actual life competes with a curated collection of everyone else's most stimulating moments. No ordinary day can win that competition. There is another misunderstanding that makes this problem harder. People often describe overstimulation as if the brain contains a pleasure tank that can be emptied by too much entertainment and refilled by suffering through boredom. That explanation is attractive because it is simple. But your mind is not a battery that can be reset in one dramatic weekend. Dopamine is involved in motivation, learning, anticipation, and many other processes. It is not simply a chemical version of happiness. You do not ruin your brain by enjoying music, games, food, or social media. And you do not become permanently healed by avoiding pleasure for 24 hours. The more useful question is behavioral. What expectations are your habits creating? What does your attention now require before something feels worth engaging with? How quickly do you abandon activities that do not reward you immediately? How often do you use stimulation to interrupt discomfort? Overstimulation is less like poisoning yourself and more like adjusting the brightness on a screen. If the brightness remains extremely high, normal light looks dim. The normal light did not lose its value. Your eyes adapted to a stronger contrast. The same can happen with novelty. When the mind receives constant change, stability can feel weak. When every few seconds bring a new face, sound, idea, or emotion, a single task feels unusually slow. This adaptation can occur without any moral failure. Human attention is naturally responsive to novelty. New information may matter. A change in the environment may signal opportunity or danger. Digital environments simply provide more novelty than previous generations could encounter in an ordinary day. Your mind is doing what minds do, orienting toward change. The problem is that modern systems can produce change without end. There is no natural stopping point, no final page, no completed episode, no moment when the environment says, "You have seen enough." You must create the stopping point yourself, using the very attention that the environment is continuously pulling away. This is why individual discipline alone often feels insufficient. You are not making one decision, you are making the same decision repeatedly against a system designed to make continuation effortless. The answer is not shame. Shame adds emotional pain, which creates a stronger desire to escape, which often sends you back to the same habit. You scroll, feel guilty, call yourself undisciplined, and scroll again to avoid the guilt. A better approach begins with honesty. The habit is serving a function. Perhaps it lowers anxiety. Perhaps it fills loneliness. Perhaps it gives structure to unplanned time. Perhaps it offers an easy sense of participation when your real life feels passive. You cannot remove a habit effectively while refusing to understand what it provides. If you remove constant input but leave the underlying loneliness untouched, the silence may become unbearable. If you remove distraction but leave your work chaotic, you may return to distraction because the task remains confusing. So instead of asking only, "How do I stop?" ask, "What do I receive here?" Relief, novelty, social contact, avoidance, emotional intensity, a sense that something is always happening? Then ask, what is the cost? Fragmented attention, lost sleep, reduced patience, constant comparison, a weaker relationship with your body? The feeling that life is passing while you observe other lives? Both sides matter. If you look only at the cost, you become judgmental. If you look only at the benefit, you remain trapped. Change begins when you see the entire exchange. For example, short videos may give immediate stimulation during a difficult day. that benefit is real. But if you watch until 2 in the morning, the same habit reduces sleep, which makes concentration and emotional regulation harder the next day, which increases the desire for easy stimulation. The habit becomes part of the problem it temporarily relieves. This is common in self-regulation loops. You use something to feel better now, and the long-term effect makes you more vulnerable to the same need later. More tired, more restless, more dissatisfied, more likely to seek another quick escape. You do not break this loop through a single heroic decision. You break it by changing the conditions under which the loop operates. You make some forms of stimulation less automatic. You create distance between impulse and action. You protect sleep. You allow boredom to exist long enough for another desire to appear. You plan meaningful alternatives before the urge arrives. Most importantly, you stop demanding that ordinary life compete with engineered intensity. A book should not have to capture you like a feed. A friend should not have to entertain you every 10 seconds. A hobby should not have to produce visible progress immediately. Your work should not always feel inspiring. Mature engagement includes stretches of neutrality, not pain, not ecstasy, just continuity. This may be the state your mind has forgotten how to trust. Neutrality feels suspicious when you are used to emotional peaks. You assume that if something is not exciting, it is meaningless. If you are not motivated, you should not begin. If the reward is not immediate, the effort is probably wrong. But much of a meaningful life is built in emotionally ordinary moments. You practice when you do not feel inspired. You listen when the conversation is not dramatic. You care for your body through repetitive actions. You build trust through predictable behavior. The result may become deeply satisfying, but the process rarely feels intense every day. If intensity becomes your definition of aliveness, you may continually abandon the very things capable of creating a life you value. Consider how you now experience time. Waiting has become almost unacceptable. The elevator takes too long, so you check. The traffic light takes too long, so you check. Someone pauses during a conversation, so your attention drifts. A website loads for a few seconds and irritation rises. These moments are tiny, but together they reveal a nervous system with very little tolerance for unfilled time. The problem is not the phone itself. The problem is that every pause has become an invitation to leave the present. When pauses disappear, patience weakens. Patience is not simply the ability to suffer politely. It is the ability to remain engaged when reward is delayed. Every meaningful skill depends on delayed reward. Learning an instrument sounds bad before it sounds good. Writing feels awkward before ideas become clear. Exercise can feel heavy before it becomes energizing. Friendship requires many ordinary meetings before deep trust forms. If you repeatedly choose activities that reward you instantly, slower rewards begin feeling unusually expensive. You interpret the cost of beginning as proof that you lack motivation. But motivation often follows movement. The desire to continue appears after you have already started. Waiting for motivation can become another form of avoidance, because the mind expects the emotional reward to arrive before the action. This expectation is strengthened by digital consumption. You do not need to generate interest. The system generates it for you. If one thing is boring, another appears. The environment adapts to your attention. while real life requires your attention to adapt to the environment. That reversal is important. A feed asks, "What will keep you here?" A difficult task asks, "Can you remain here even when it does not immediately reward you?" One environment continuously adjusts itself to your impulses. The other asks you to develop beyond them. No wonder the second feels harder. The result is not only difficulty with work, it can change your identity. You may begin calling yourself lazy, inconsistent, or incapable. You remember the projects you abandoned, the books you never finished, the plans that dissolved after a few days. Each unfinished effort becomes evidence against you. You approach the next attempt with less trust. The discomfort at the beginning feels familiar, and you assume the ending will be familiar too. Then you escape early, partly to avoid confirming another failure. The escape confirms it anyway. This is how fragmented attention becomes self-doubt. To rebuild attention, you also need to rebuild self-trust. That means making promises small enough to keep. Not announcing a complete transformation, not creating an extreme schedule that collapses after 3 days. You begin with an amount of focus you can repeat. 10 minutes without switching. 1 page. 1 walk around the block without audio. 1 meal without a screen. 1 conversation in which the phone remains out of reach. These actions may seem too small to matter, but the goal is not immediate productivity. The goal is teaching yourself that an urge can appear without controlling the next action. The urge says, check. You notice it. You remain. Nothing dramatic happens. That is the lesson. At first, this may feel like deprivation. Over time, it becomes freedom. Freedom is not never wanting stimulation. It is having enough space between desire and action to choose. Choice requires awareness. Most habits operate too quickly for awareness. The cue and response are nearly fused. A difficult sentence appears and the browser opens. A moment of loneliness appears and the feed begins. You can create awareness by increasing friction. Keep the phone in another room. Log out. Remove visual cues. Turn off non-essential notifications. Use 1 device for 1 type of activity. Decide in advance when entertainment begins and ends. These methods may sound weak compared with willpower. In practice, environment often shapes behavior more reliably than intention. A person with perfect intentions and constant access may struggle more than a person with ordinary intentions and a well-designed environment. This is not cheating. You already live inside environments designed to influence you. The question is whether you will design any part of the environment in your own interest. Friction gives the conscious mind time to arrive. When opening an application requires several steps, the automatic loop is interrupted. You can ask, do I actually want this, or am I escaping something? Sometimes you will still choose it. That is fine. Conscious entertainment is different from unconscious disappearance. The problem is not watching a show you enjoy. The problem is looking up 4 hours later and feeling that no decision was ever made. Intentional pleasure leaves a memory. Compulsive stimulation often leaves only time missing. This distinction can guide you. After an activity, do you feel nourished, connected, amused, informed, or genuinely rested? Or do you feel dull, scattered, and hungry for more? Not every experience needs to be productive. Pleasure does not need to justify itself. But pleasure that repeatedly fails to satisfy deserves examination. Sometimes the solution is not less entertainment.
It is better contact with the entertainment. Watch one film without checking your phone.
Listen to an album without using it as background. Play a game because you chose it, then stop at a chosen point. Depth can transform consumption too. The issue is not only what you do, it is how fully you are there. Multitasking deserves special attention because it often feels productive while quietly reducing the quality of experience. You answer a message during a meeting. You watch a video while eating. You listen to a podcast while writing. You switch between documents, conversations, and notifications. The mind experiences this as activity. Activity can feel like progress, but switching is not the same as advancing. Each time you change tasks, part of your attention remains attached to what you just left. The next task receives a mind that is not fully available. Then you switch again before it settles. By the end of the day, you may have touched many things and completed almost nothing. This creates a particular kind of exhaustion, the fatigue of movement without a rival. You were busy, but you did not experience completion. Completion matters because it gives the nervous system a clear signal: this is done. Without completion, everything remains psychologically open. The unread message, the unfinished document, the paused video, the half-heard conversation, the task you started and abandoned. Each one leaves a small thread. Individually, the thread is light. Together, they create mental noise. This may be why you struggle to rest. Your body stops working, but your mind continues tracking open loops. You reach for entertainment, hoping to shut the noise down, but entertainment adds more input without resolving what is unfinished. Rest becomes another layer. True rest is not always the addition of something pleasant. Sometimes it is the removal of demand. No new information, no decision, no performance, no need to respond. Yet removal can feel uncomfortable because many people use stimulation to avoid the transition out of productivity. The moment work ends, they do not know what to do with themselves. Without tasks, identity becomes unclear. Without messages, they feel irrelevant. Without content, they feel alone. Constant stimulation protects them from the question, who am I when nothing requires me? This can be especially powerful for people whose self-worth is tied to achievement. They say they want rest, but rest removes the evidence that they are useful. So they choose a form of rest that still feels active, researching, optimizing, organizing, consuming advice. They watch videos about relaxing instead of relaxing. They read about focus instead of focusing. They collect systems instead of practicing one. Self-improvement becomes another stream of stimulation. The mind feels productive because it is learning. But learning without application can become sophisticated avoidance. You know 10 methods for concentration and use none of them long enough to change. Information creates the feeling of movement before behavior changes. This is why advice can become addictive. Each new idea gives hope without requiring the discomfort of repetition. You may not need another system. You may need to tolerate the boredom of using the system you already have. Repetition is where novelty disappears and transformation begins. This applies to work, exercise, therapy, meditation, and nearly every meaningful practice. At first, the method feels interesting. Then it becomes ordinary. That ordinary phase is where many people quit. They assume the loss of excitement means the method stopped working. Often it means the method is becoming familiar enough to become part of life. Familiarity is not failure. The same misunderstanding affects goals. The fantasy of a goal is emotionally intense. You imagine the new body, the finished project, the changed life. Beginning creates energy because everything feels possible. Then the work becomes specific. The project contains mistakes. The body changes slowly. Progress is uneven. The fantasy loses brightness. A novelty-trained mind interprets this as a sign to find a new goal. New goals restore possibility without exposing you to the limits of execution. Soon you have many beginnings and few endings. This does not mean you should force every project to completion. Some plans should be abandoned. But the decision should come from reflection, not simply from the moment excitement fades. Ask whether the goal still matters when it is no longer new. Can you accept a version of progress that is repetitive, invisible, and occasionally frustrating? If not, you may remain dependent on the emotional high of beginning. Beginning allows you to imagine who you could become. Continuing forces you to meet who you are. Your current patience, skill, fear, and discipline. That meeting can be uncomfortable. Stimulation offers an exit. One more video, one more idea, one more plan. The escape protects the ideal self from being tested. This is why attention work can become emotional work. You are not only learning to stay with a task, you are learning to stay with the imperfect version of yourself who is doing it. The person who gets confused, the person who progresses slowly, the person who produces something average before producing something good, the person who cannot feel inspired every day. Can you remain present with that person without reaching for a distraction that restores fantasy? This is a deeper form of patience. It allows growth to become real. Social comparison adds another layer. The human mind has always compared, but never before has it had access to so many carefully selected lives at once. You can see someone younger achieving more, someone wealthier living better, someone more attractive receiving attention, someone more disciplined transforming faster. The comparison often happens without context. You see an outcome without the years behind it, a room without the debt, a body without the lighting, a success without the support, luck, sacrifice, or repeated failure. Your nervous system responds as if the comparison is immediate and personal. Their achievement becomes evidence that you are behind. Then your ordinary life loses emotional color. The apartment seems smaller. The job seems meaningless. The weekend seems empty. Not because anything changed, but because your reference point did. This is one reason life can feel boring after scrolling. You have not merely consumed entertainment, you have raised the emotional standard against which reality is judged. A quiet breakfast now competes with luxury travel, dramatic transformations, perfect relationships, extreme beauty, and constant celebration. Reality cannot sustain that level of presentation, nor should it. A life composed only of highlights would become exhausting. You need repetition, maintenance, and privacy. You need moments that are not useful to anyone else. You need experiences that do not become content. But when you view your own life through the imagined eyes of an audience, private moments can feel valueless. Would anyone care about this walk? Is this meal worth photographing? Does this hobby make me impressive? Is this progress visible enough? The audience may not exist, yet it shapes the experience. You begin living as both participant and observer. Part of you is in the moment. Another part is evaluating how the moment appears. This division weakens presence. You cannot fully inhabit an experience while constantly converting it into evidence of a successful life. Some memories are strengthened by photographs. Others are interrupted by the need to produce them. The issue is not taking pictures. It is whether the picture serves the experience or the experience serves the picture. When appearance becomes central, simple pleasure becomes difficult. Simple pleasure often has no status. Drinking tea, sitting in sunlight, repeating a song, repairing something, talking to an old friend, walking the same route. These experiences do not prove that your life is extraordinary. They may still make it deeply yours. The desire for an extraordinary life can become contempt for an ordinary day. But your life is mostly ordinary days. If you cannot enter them, you cannot enter most of your life. This does not mean abandoning ambition. Ambition can be healthy. The question is whether ambition grows from desire or from humiliation. Do you want to build something? Or are you trying to escape the shame of not already having built it? Do you want change? Or do you want relief from comparison? When the goal is relief from comparison, success rarely satisfies. There is always someone ahead. The standard moves as soon as you approach it. You may achieve what you wanted and still feel behind, because the comparison system remains unchanged. This is another form of overstimulation. Not too many sounds or images, but too many standards. Too many lives entering your mental space. Too many definitions of success. Your own values become difficult to hear. You may pursue a career because it looks impressive, a body because it receives attention, a lifestyle because it photographs well, or a routine because disciplined people online seem to live that way. Then you achieve parts of it and feel strangely absent. The life is organized, but not around you. Reducing stimulation can therefore reveal grief. You may realize how much time was spent pursuing desires you absorbed from others. That realization is painful. It is also clarifying. Without constant comparison, quieter preferences can return. Perhaps you do not want the fastest career. Perhaps you prefer a smaller social life. Perhaps your idea of success includes time, health, creative work, or a home that feels peaceful. These desires may seem less exciting because they are less performative. They do not create the same public image, but they may create a more livable private reality. A meaningful life is not the life that produces the strongest reaction from strangers. It is the life you can remain inside when nobody is watching. That kind of life may look ordinary. It may not feel ordinary when it is truly yours. Now consider the way overstimulation changes emotion. When every uncomfortable feeling can be interrupted instantly, emotional tolerance weakens. Sadness appears and you open a screen. Anxiety appears and you search. Loneliness appears and you enter a feed full of people. The feeling may decrease temporarily, but it does not necessarily complete. It waits. Emotions often need attention, expression, movement, conversation, or time. Distraction can help in healthy doses. Sometimes you need a break, but constant interruption prevents you from learning that feelings can rise, peak, and pass. Without that learning, discomfort begins to feel dangerous. The first sign of restlessness triggers escape. You may say, "I cannot sit with my thoughts." Often, the difficulty is not the thoughts themselves. It is that you have had little practice sitting long enough to discover what follows them. The mind produces a painful thought. If you escape immediately,
The thought remains powerful and unfinished.
If you remain, another thought may appear, then a memory, then grief, then perhaps clarity. This is not always pleasant, but clarity rarely develops in the first second. The avoidance of emotion can also make pleasure less available. The same nervous system experiences both. When you remain disconnected from sadness, fear, and loneliness, you may also become less sensitive to calm enjoyment. Numbness is not selective. People sometimes say, "I feel nothing," while their days are filled with frantic activity. The activity may be preventing feeling rather than creating it. This is why a quiet day can initially produce emotional collapse. The stimulation stops and everything that was postponed becomes present at once. You may suddenly feel tired, empty, or sad. You may interpret this as proof that reducing stimulation made you worse. In reality, the reduction may have removed the noise that was hiding your condition. This distinction is important. Overstimulation is not the only reason nothing feels good. Persistent loss of pleasure, hopelessness, major changes in sleep or appetite, severe anxiety, or an inability to function can be signs of depression, burnout, trauma-related distress, attention difficulties, medication effects, or other health issues. A video cannot diagnose you. A weekend without social media cannot treat every problem. If emptiness is persistent or intense, professional support matters. You deserve more than an internet explanation that blames everything on discipline. At the same time, even when deeper issues are present, attention habits can influence how you experience them. Poor sleep, constant comparison, endless switching, and isolation can make emotional life harder. The goal is not to choose one explanation. It is to examine the full system. How are you sleeping? How often are you outside? Do you speak honestly with anyone? Does your body move? Do you have unstructured time? Do you use substances or screens to change every uncomfortable state? Do your days contain any activity that asks for sustained attention? Do you feel connected to your work or only pressured by it? No single answer explains a person, but patterns become visible when you stop reducing everything to laziness. The label lazy is often psychologically convenient because it ends investigation. You are lazy, case closed. The label creates shame but no understanding. Understanding asks more difficult questions. Are you exhausted? Are you afraid of failing? Is the task unclear? Is the reward too distant? Have you trained your attention to expect constant novelty? Are you grieving? Are you living according to values that do not belong to you? Do you avoid beginning because beginning will reveal what you can and cannot do? These questions do not remove responsibility. They make responsibility usable. You cannot change a moral accusation. You can change a pattern. Perhaps you need sleep. Perhaps you need structure. Perhaps you need treatment. Perhaps you need to stop placing the most stimulating device you own beside your bed. Perhaps you need to admit that your current work has no meaning for you. Perhaps you need to tolerate a period of boredom while your attention becomes less reactive. Different causes require different actions. The common principle is honesty without humiliation. You are not a machine that should perform regardless of conditions. You are also not powerless. You influence the conditions repeatedly. This balanced position is less dramatic than self-blame or total excuse. It is also more effective. You say,
This is not entirely my fault, and it is still my life. That sentence creates agency without cruelty. Boredom itself deserves rehabilitation. Many people treat boredom as a mistake, a signal that the current moment has failed to entertain them. But boredom can be a transition state. The first layer says, nothing is happening. If you remain, a second layer may appear. Restlessness, then impulses, then forgotten thoughts, then curiosity. The mind begins generating rather than receiving. Children often say they are bored shortly before inventing a game. Adults rarely reach that point because we can remove boredom immediately. When every quiet moment is filled, imagination becomes unnecessary. The world always supplies the next image. Creativity requires internal space. Not only inspiration, but absence. Something is missing, so the mind begins forming it. This is why ideas often arrive during walking, showering, cleaning, or waiting. These activities occupy part of attention without consuming all of it. The mind can wander, combine, and return. Mind wandering is not always distraction. Sometimes it is mental integration. Of course, boredom can also signal that an activity truly lacks meaning. The goal is not to romanticize every dull task. It is to stop treating the first moment of low stimulation as a final judgment. Give experiences enough time to reveal themselves. A walk may feel empty for 10 minutes. Then the body settles. You notice temperature, sound, architecture, light, and thought. A book may feel difficult for several pages. Then the language creates a world. A conversation may begin with ordinary details. Then someone says something honest. If you leave too early, you experience only beginnings. Beginnings are often shallow. Depth is delayed. This principle can guide a practical experiment. Choose one ordinary activity and remove additional stimulation. Eat without a screen. Walk without audio. Clean without a podcast. Sit on public transport without checking. The first goal is not enjoyment. The first goal is observation. Notice the sequence. When does the urge to check appear? What feeling comes before it? What story does your mind tell? This is a waste of time. I should be doing something. I might be missing something. I cannot relax. These thoughts reveal the beliefs beneath the habit. Perhaps you believe every minute must be optimized. Then stimulation is not only entertainment, it protects you from guilt. Perhaps you believe being unreachable is irresponsible. Then notifications represent duty. Perhaps you believe quiet makes you unproductive. Then rest threatens identity. A habit cannot be fully changed while its underlying belief remains unquestioned. Ask whether the belief is true. Does every minute need visible value? Are you responsible for immediate access at all times? Does rest reduce your worth? Would the people you love become less valuable if they stopped producing for an afternoon? You probably offer others more humanity than you offer yourself. This harshness can drive overstimulation. You do not permit genuine rest, so you collapse into compulsive consumption. Then you judge the consumption because it did not restore you. The cycle looks like laziness from the outside. Inside, it may be over-control followed by escape. Real rest often needs permission, not a reward after perfect productivity, a basic requirement for a mind and body that have limits. Rest may include sleep, quiet, nature, stretching, play, conversation, or doing something with no measurable outcome. It may also include entertainment. The question is whether the entertainment gives you rest or prevents you from noticing that you need it. Sometimes you do not need another episode. You need to go to bed.
Sometimes you do not need motivation, you need food. Sometimes you do not need a better productivity system, you need to grieve. Sometimes you do not need stimulation, you need company. The habit offers one solution for many different needs. That is why it often fails. You cannot scroll your way into sleep. You cannot consume your way into belonging. You cannot distract your way into self-respect. You may temporarily cover the absence. The need remains. Learning to identify the actual need reduces dependence on the automatic solution. Pause and ask, what am I asking this screen to do for me right now? Entertain me? Comfort me? Numb me? Connect me? Delay something? Change my mood? Then choose with more precision. Sometimes the screen is a reasonable answer. Sometimes it is only the fastest answer. Sleep is one of the most practical places to begin because tired attention seeks easy stimulation. When you are exhausted, difficult tasks feel more threatening. Emotional regulation becomes harder. The ability to resist impulses weakens. Quick rewards become more attractive. Then, late-night stimulation delays sleep further. This creates a loop that looks like a motivation problem during the day and a self-control problem at night. It may be neither. It may be a sleep problem reinforced by habit. Late at night, you may say, "This is the only time that belongs to me." The day was filled with obligations, so you resist ending it. You reclaim freedom through another video, another conversation, another hour. The desire is understandable, but the reclaimed time is borrowed from tomorrow. The next day begins with less energy and more resentment. You need more stimulation to function. The evening becomes the next opportunity to escape. Breaking this cycle may require giving yourself ownership earlier, not merely forcing an earlier bedtime. Where can you create a small part of the day that is not work, service, or obligation? Without that space, the night becomes emotionally valuable. You are not only giving up entertainment, you are giving up the first moment in which nobody is asking anything from you. A sustainable routine recognizes that need. You create an evening transition rather than demanding an immediate stop. Lower the input gradually. Finish active communication. Move the phone away from the bed. Choose something with an ending, one chapter, one episode, one album, one shower. Endless formats are difficult at night because tired minds struggle to create stopping points. A stopping ritual can be simple. Plug the phone outside the bedroom. Write down tomorrow's tasks so the mind does not keep rehearsing them. Dim the room. Repeat the same sequence. Repetition teaches the body what is coming. The goal is not a perfect nighttime routine. Perfection creates another performance. The goal is reducing the number of decisions required when self-control is lowest. Morning matters too. You do not need an hour of meditation and cold water. You need a few minutes in which your mind enters your life before entering everyone else's. Do not begin with a feed. Open a curtain, drink water, stand outside, write one sentence, make the bed, walk to another room before touching the phone. These small acts establish sequence. First, my body and environment, then the world. The change may feel insignificant, but the first input often sets the tone. When you begin with urgency and comparison, calm work must fight uphill. Protecting the first part of the day is not about purity. It is about choosing your starting point. Attention is easier to direct before it has been scattered. This also applies to work sessions. Begin before opening communication when possible.
Decide the first task the night before. Make the starting step obvious. A vague task creates friction. Work on project. A visible task creates movement. Open the document and rewrite the first paragraph. The mind often escapes because the task is emotionally and practically undefined. The screen offers clarity. Click here. Watch this. Keep scrolling. Your real work needs clearer doors. Once you begin, use a period short enough that resistance does not become overwhelming. 20 minutes, 30 minutes. The exact number matters less than consistency. During that period, one task. Not because multitasking makes you a bad person, but because depth needs continuity. When the urge to switch appears, write it down instead of following it. Check email. Search that idea. Reply later. The list reassures the mind that the impulse will not be forgotten. Then return. You are practicing return, not perfect concentration. Attention wanders. That is normal. The skill is noticing and coming back without turning one distraction into 20 minutes of disappearance. This approach is gentler than demanding total control. It treats attention as trainable. At first, you may return 50 times. Those 50 returns are not 50 failures. They are the exercise. Over time, the distance between interruptions grows. The mind learns that it does not need to obey every new thought. Reducing stimulation without adding meaningful activity creates a vacuum. That vacuum is one reason extreme digital detoxes often collapse. You remove the habit, but the day has no structure, connection, or purpose. Then boredom becomes not a transition, but an empty room. The solution is not filling every minute again. It is creating a few activities that involve your body, attention, and values. Physical activity is useful not because it makes you morally superior, but because it returns attention to sensation, breathing, balance, effort, temperature, rhythm. The body exists in the present. The mind can travel through hundreds of imagined lives, but the body is always here. Walking can be enough. Stretching, cleaning, cooking, repairing, gardening, anything in which the hands interact with the physical world. Digital life often gives the feeling of movement without physical consequence. You swipe, click, react, and consume, while the body remains nearly still. Physical tasks restore a visible relationship between action and result. You wash the dish and it becomes clean. You cut the vegetables and the meal appears. You walk the distance and you arrive. These experiences can feel modest, but they give the nervous system completion. Creative activity offers another form of completion. Draw badly, write privately, play an instrument without recording, build something nobody will see. When creativity is immediately shared, performance enters. You begin predicting reaction. The audience shapes the work before the work has time to become yours. Private creation protects experimentation. You are allowed to make something useless, unfinished, embarrassing, or small. This can be difficult after years of public comparison. You may think, what is the point if nobody sees it? The point is that you see what your attention can produce when it is not being harvested by someone else. Creation turns attention into form. Consumption turns form into stimulation. Both are valuable, but an imbalance can leave you feeling passive. You receive endless expressions of other people's minds, while your own remains unexpressed. That passivity may be part of the emptiness. You are not only hungry for better content, You may be hungry to participate in your own life. Connection is equally important. Digital contact can be real, but constant light interaction may replace deeper conversation. You know what many people posted, yet nobody knows how you are doing.
A feed creates social presence without the vulnerability of being personally seen. You can feel surrounded and lonely at the same time. Deep connection requires duration, attention, and risk. You ask a second question. You tolerate pauses. You say what is actually happening. You listen without preparing your response. These skills weaken when conversation is constantly interrupted. The phone on the table changes the psychological environment even when nobody touches it. Part of the mind knows another world is available. Try creating small areas of undivided contact. A meal, a walk, a call. No need for dramatic confession, simply remain. People become interesting when you stop expecting them to perform at the speed of content. They repeat themselves, search for words, take time to reveal what they mean. Human beings are not optimized feeds. That is part of their value. Nature can also help, not as a magical cure, but as a different sensory environment.
Natural scenes change more slowly. The tension can soften. There is detail without constant demand. A tree does not need you to react. A river does not ask you to choose the next video. The environment offers stimulation without instruction. This allows another mode of attention, receptive rather than defensive. You do not have to move to the wilderness. A park, a street with trees, a balcony, an open window, daylight on a wall. The point is contact with something that is not designed to capture you. Your attention needs environments in which it is allowed to belong to you. The process of recovering sensitivity can feel disappointing at first. People expect that after reducing stimulation, they will immediately become focused, peaceful, and motivated. Instead, they may feel bored, restless, tired, or emotionally exposed. This is not a dramatic reset montage. It is adaptation in the opposite direction.
You are teaching the mind that lower intensity does not mean danger or emptiness. That lesson takes repetition. At first, reading may still feel difficult. You may check the clock. Thoughts will wander. You may need to reread a page. Do not use the difficulty as evidence that the experiment failed. Difficulty is the experiment. You are meeting the current state of your attention. The same applies to pleasure. A simple activity may not suddenly become beautiful. You may walk without your phone and feel only annoyed. Stay honest. Do not pretend to enjoy what you do not enjoy. The goal is not to perform mindfulness. The goal is to create enough contact for genuine preference to appear. Perhaps you dislike walking. Fine. Try cooking, swimming, drawing, building, reading, conversation, or music. The deeper question is whether you can give anything enough time to become more than its first impression. Pleasure often returns quietly. You notice that food has texture. A song sounds fuller when it is not competing with another task. You remember what someone said because you were listening. You finish a small piece of work and feel clean satisfaction rather than dramatic excitement. These moments may seem weak compared with the rush of constant novelty, but they accumulate. Stable satisfaction is less intense and more nourishing. It does not always demand repetition immediately. It leaves you complete enough to stop. This is one way to distinguish pleasure from compulsion. After pleasure, you can often say, "That was good."
After compulsion, the mind says, more. Of course, the distinction is not perfect. Enjoyable things can invite more. But observe the emotional quality. Is the desire warm or desperate? Are you choosing continuation or avoiding the moment of stopping? Stopping can reveal the truth of an activity. If you feel panic, irritability, or emptiness the moment it ends, the activity may have been regulating more than boredom. That does not make it evil. It tells you what needs care. Perhaps you are lonely. Perhaps the day contains no meaningful challenge. Perhaps your work drains you. Perhaps you have lost contact with people. Perhaps you are depressed. The overstimulation may be a symptom, a cause, and a coping strategy at the same time. Complex systems rarely have one direction. This is why compassion matters. You are not trying to defeat an enemy inside yourself. You are trying to understand an adaptation. At some point, the habit helped. Maybe it carried you through isolation. Maybe it gave you relief during stress. Maybe it offered community when your environment did not. You do not need to hate the tool to change your relationship with it. Gratitude and boundaries can coexist. You can say, "This helped me survive a period of my life, and it no longer deserves unlimited access to my attention." That is a mature ending, not dramatic rejection, recalibration. You decide what role the tool will play, rather than allowing the tool to define the shape of the day. A practical reset can begin without extremes. Choose one protected period in the morning and one in the evening. Keep them modest enough to repeat. Choose one room or activity in which the phone does not participate. The bed, the table, the bathroom, the walk. Turn off notifications that do not come from actual people or essential services. Most notifications are not information you requested. They are requests for your return. Move entertainment out of immediate reach during work, not because you should be strong enough to resist, but because resistance consumes energy. Decide what you want to watch before opening a platform. Search for the thing instead of entering an endless recommendation stream. Use endings: 1 episode, 20 minutes, a saved article, a playlist with a final song. Endings protect attention. Create a capture list for impulses. When you want to search, buy, check, or message something during focused work, write it down. Review the list later. Many impulses will no longer matter. Practice one daily period of single tasking. No need for hours. The mind learns through repeated conditions. Eat one meal with full attention. Speak to one person without checking. Walk one route without audio. Read 10 pages. Sit for 5 minutes after an activity ends. That last practice matters. Do not immediately replace one experience with another. Let the nervous system register completion. After work, pause before opening entertainment. Ask what you need: rest, movement, food, company, escape. There's no wrong answer. The answer simply creates choice. If you choose entertainment, enjoy it intentionally. Do not ruin pleasure with moral panic. Shame turns recreation into conflict. Create something before consuming on some days. A paragraph, a sketch, a meal, a solved problem, a small repair. Let your attention produce before it receives. Protect sleep as if tomorrow's attention depends on it, because it does. Notice comparison triggers. Some accounts inspire action, others create paralysis and contempt for your own life. You are allowed to remove inputs that repeatedly make you smaller. This is not weakness. Attention is a limited environment. Curating it is a form of psychological hygiene. But do not transform the reset into another performance. You do not need to announce it, track every minute, or create a perfect identity around being digitally disciplined. The goal is not becoming the kind of person who never scrolls. The goal is becoming the kind of person who can stop. Not because the content ended, because you decided your life was waiting. There will be relapses, a stressful week, a late night, an hour that becomes 3. Do not turn a lapse into an identity. Notice the conditions. Tired, lonely, avoiding something, no plan, phone beside the bed. Change the condition and continue. All or nothing thinking serves compulsive habits. Once the perfect streak breaks, the mind says nothing matters. Then one evening becomes a week. Consistency is not never leaving the path. It is returning before the distance becomes enormous. Return without ceremony. Close the application, stand up, drink water, open the document, go outside, send the honest message, go to sleep. The next useful action is usually small. That is good. Small actions can be repeated, and repeated actions change environments, expectations, and identity. Eventually, the deeper work is deciding what deserves your attention. Attention is not merely a productivity resource.
It is the substance from which experience is made.
Your life is not only what happens around you, it is what you remain present long enough to receive. Whatever repeatedly receives your attention becomes larger in your psychological world. If comparison receives it, inadequacy grows. If outrage receives it, conflict grows. If scattered novelty receives it, restlessness grows. If a craft receives it, skill grows. If a friendship receives it, intimacy grows. If your body receives it, awareness grows. This does not mean attention controls everything. Life contains pain, illness, injustice, and loss that cannot be solved by focus. But attention influences what becomes rooted. You cannot care deeply for everything at once. Unlimited access to information creates the illusion that you should. Every tragedy, every debate, every trend, every person's opinion, every opportunity. The mind begins treating awareness as responsibility. If you do not know, you are ignorant. If you do not react, you are uncaring. If you do not respond, you are falling behind. No nervous system can live at that scale. You need limits, not because the world does not matter, but because your ability to respond meaningfully depends on them. Choose a few sources, a few people, a few commitments. Let some information pass without entering you. This can feel irresponsible in a culture that rewards constant awareness, but awareness without capacity can become helpless agitation. You are informed about everything and able to influence almost nothing. The emotional energy remains trapped. Focused care is different. You choose where your action is possible. Perhaps you support one cause, help one person, learn one subject deeply, participate in one community. Depth turns concern into relationship. Breadth often turns concern into exhaustion. The same principle applies to ambition. You cannot build 5 lives simultaneously. Every chosen path excludes others. Overstimulation keeps all possibilities mentally open. You see countless careers, cities, identities, lifestyles, and skills. Each one creates a possible self. Possibility is exciting. Choice is painful because it ends alternatives. So you continue browsing lives instead of entering one.
Commitment may feel boring because it repeats the same direction, but repetition is what allows a direction to become a path. A life is created partly through what you stop reconsidering every day. You decide to care for this body, this work, these people, this place, this practice, not because they are always exciting, because they are yours to deepen. Without commitment, novelty keeps you moving laterally, new option, new idea, new beginning. With commitment, movement becomes vertical. You learn more, see more, become more capable of perception. The same place changes because you have changed. This is the hidden reward of sustained attention. The world becomes richer without becoming louder. A beginner sees a tree. A botanist sees structure, species, disease, adaptation, history. A beginner hears a song. A musician hears rhythm, harmony, tension, technique. A stranger sees a face. A friend sees years. Depth multiplies detail. Perhaps life feels boring not because it contains too little, but because you have not remained with anything long enough to perceive what it contains. The feed offers endless variety at low depth. A meaningful life may offer limited variety at increasing depth. At first, endless variety wins. Over time, depth becomes a world. There may be grief in accepting this. You may see how many hours disappeared, how often you were physically present and mentally elsewhere, how many conversations received half of you, how many nights were traded for content you cannot remember. Do not use that grief to create more shame. Grief can become respect for what remains. You still have attention. It is not permanently destroyed. It is conditioned, tired, and pulled in many directions. It can be trained through use. The first evidence may be small. You finish an article, sit through discomfort, notice a bird, complete a task without checking, remember a conversation. These are not trivial achievements. They are moments in which life reaches you without needing to shout. Over time, boredom changes character. It becomes less threatening. You can sit at a table without immediately searching for input. You can wait in line and remain in your body. You can work through the flat middle of a project. The world does not become constantly exciting. That was never the goal. You become less dependent on constant excitement in order to feel alive. This creates a different form of freedom. You can enjoy stimulation without needing it. You can use technology without disappearing into it. You can receive information without allowing every piece to become urgent. You can choose intensity and return to quiet. Quiet stops feeling like punishment. It becomes a place where thought, emotion, memory, and desire can take shape. Perhaps you discover that you are tired, not bored. Perhaps you discover that you dislike your work. Perhaps you discover a creative interest buried under years of consumption. Perhaps you discover loneliness that needs people, not content. Perhaps you discover that your life contains more pleasure than you noticed. The answer will not be the same for everyone, but you cannot hear the answer while every silence is interrupted. So begin without drama. Let one moment remain empty. Let one urge pass. Let one task continue after the excitement ends. Let one ordinary experience become complete. You do not need to make life more intense. You may need to become available to its quieter forms. The morning light on a wall, the first calm breath after effort, the satisfaction of finishing something nobody applauds, the voice of a friend who is not performing. the weight of your body becoming tired for a real reason, the pleasure of understanding a difficult idea, the relief of being unreachable for an hour. These experiences may not compete with engineered novelty in the first second. They do not need to. They offer something novelty often cannot: continuity. They become part of you. That may be what you have been missing, not excitement, contact. Your life may not be boring. Your mind may simply be too full to feel it. And the way back is not to hate yourself, punish yourself, or escape into a more disciplined identity. The way back is to clear a little space, protect a little attention, stay a little longer. Then allow the ordinary world to become visible again. It has been here the entire time, quietly waiting for you to return.
There is one more cost of overstimulation that is easy to miss. It can make you feel as if you have no stable self. Your preferences change with the latest input. Your goals change after every persuasive video. Your mood changes with the emotional tone of whatever you just consumed. You may wake up wanting simplicity, watch someone discussing ambition, and decide you are wasting your potential. Then you see someone living slowly and decide your ambition is unhealthy. Then someone displays wealth, discipline, beauty, travel, or spiritual peace, and another version of your future appears. By evening, you have imagined several lives and committed to none. This can create identity fatigue. You are constantly evaluating who you should become. The mind never gets to inhabit a direction long enough for preference to stabilize. The problem is not exposure to different ideas. New ideas can free you. The problem is continuous exposure without digestion. An idea enters, produces emotion, and is replaced before you test it against reality. You confuse being moved by an idea with believing it. You confuse saving advice with practicing it. You confuse recognizing yourself in a video with understanding yourself. Identity requires more than recognition. It requires choice, action, consequence, and time. You discover whether you value creativity by creating when it becomes difficult. You discover whether you value freedom by accepting the responsibility that freedom requires. You discover whether you value health through the ordinary behaviors that protect it. Values are not only statements that feel true, they are patterns you are willing to repeat. Overstimulation can keep values at the level of inspiration. You feel deeply for a minute, then the feeling is replaced. Nothing is wrong with you. The emotional environment simply changes too quickly for commitment to form. This is why journaling can help. Not because writing is magical, but because it slows thought enough for you to see it. A thought on a feed belongs partly to the person presenting it. A thought written privately must meet your own language. You can ask, what do I still believe after the emotional effect has faded? What do I want when nobody is showing me what to want? What problem in my actual life deserves attention this month? These questions reduce the scale of possibility. A month is more livable than an entire imagined future. One problem is more workable than a complete reinvention. Choose fewer questions. Let answers become behavior before collecting new answers. You may fear that narrowing your attention will make you miss opportunities. That fear is understandable. But a life spent preserving every possibility can miss the experience of choosing any possibility fully. Opportunity has value only when you have capacity to respond. More options do not always create more freedom. Beyond the point, they create paralysis. Every choice becomes evidence that another choice was abandoned. Digital environments keep abandoned alternatives visible. You choose one path and immediately see someone thriving on another. This makes commitment feel like error. But no path can be judged fairly while you continuously compare it with the highlight of every other path. Commitment does not mean refusing to change. It means giving a direction enough time to produce real information. You cannot know whether a practice works after 3 distracted attempts. You cannot know whether a place feels like home after constantly imagining departure. You cannot know your capacity for a skill while repeatedly returning to the beginner stage. Attention creates evidence. Without sustained attention, you are forced to make decisions from fantasy. This may be why you feel uncertain about everything. Not because every choice is wrong, but because no choice receives enough continuity to become knowable. Reducing stimulation, therefore, can make decisions easier. The options do not disappear. Their emotional volume decreases. You can hear preference beneath persuasion. You can notice that a goal looked exciting but felt empty in practice. You can notice that a quiet activity looked unimpressive but left you more alive. That information belongs to you. Another useful practice is distinguishing desire from impulse. An impulse is urgent, narrow, and focused on immediate state change. A desire can survive delay. It remains meaningful after the emotional peak passes. You see something and want it now. Wait, write it down, return tomorrow. If the desire remains, consider it. If it disappears, the impulse completed without becoming an action. This is not about denying spontaneity. It is about protecting your life from every temporary emotional weather pattern. The same applies to opinions. You do not need an immediate position on everything. You can say, "I do not know enough." You can let information remain incomplete. The pressure to react instantly keeps the mind emotionally activated. Every issue becomes a test of identity. Thoughtfulness requires delay. Delay is difficult in an environment that rewards speed, certainty, and strong emotion. But your inner life does not need to operate at the speed of a comment section. You are allowed to think slowly. You are allowed to change your mind privately. You are allowed to care without performing certainty. This protects not only attention, but integrity. Integrity forms when your words, actions, and examined values begin aligning. That process cannot be rushed by more input. At some point, you must close the source and live the idea. There is also a financial dimension to overstimulation. Constant exposure produces constant desire. Your clothing, devices, tools, routines, courses, supplements, travel, decor, and identities are presented as solutions to discomfort. The object may be useful, but the emotional sequence matters. You feel inadequate. A product appears beside an image of the person you want to become. Buying creates a brief sense of movement. The object arrives. The deeper discomfort remains. Then a new solution appears. Consumption becomes a way of purchasing possibility. This can happen even with educational products and healthy tools. You buy the notebook instead of writing, the equipment instead of training, the course instead of practicing, the application instead of creating structure. Preparation is safer than participation because preparation preserves the fantasy that success is about to begin. The missing tool becomes an excuse that protects you from testing the tools you already have. Before buying a solution,
ask what behavior it is meant to support.
Can you perform a basic version of that behavior today?
If you want to write, write with what you have. If you want to exercise, move before designing the perfect program. If you want to learn, spend time with the material before collecting another resource. Action reveals whether the desire is real. This does not mean never buying useful things. It means allowing behavior to lead consumption, rather than allowing consumption to imitate behavior. Overstimulation makes imitation easy. You can surround yourself with the appearance of a changed life, while the daily pattern remains untouched. The appearance gives temporary relief. The pattern determines the future. A quieter mind becomes harder to sell to because it can tolerate the space between discomfort and purchase. It can ask whether the problem needs an object, a skill, a conversation, a boundary, or time. That pause protects money, attention, and self-trust. It also protects desire from being continuously manipulated. The goal is not becoming immune to influence. Nobody is. The goal is recognizing that exposure changes wanting. You are not seeing a neutral world. You are seeing a world selected to keep desire active. An active desire system is profitable. A satisfied person can stop. This is why enough can feel almost rebellious. Enough information for today, enough entertainment, enough improvement, enough comparison, enough options. Enough is not the rejection of growth. It is the boundary that allows growth to become integrated. Without enough, every achievement is immediately converted into the starting point for another deficiency. You finish one task and see 10 others. Improve one area and discover 5 more to optimize. Rest for an hour and feel guilty that you did not make the rest more effective. Life becomes an endless correction of yourself. Overstimulation supplies infinite evidence that you could be better. A humane life also asks whether you can belong to yourself before improvement is complete. You are a developing person, not an unfinished product. This matters because self-rejection makes stimulation more attractive. When being alone with yourself feels like being trapped with a critic, external input becomes relief. You may need to change not only how often you reach for the phone, but what happens internally when you do not. Can your inner voice become less aggressive? Can you notice a wasted hour without declaring the whole day ruined? Can you begin again without creating a courtroom? Self-compassion is not permission to remain unconscious. It is the emotional condition that makes honest awareness tolerable. A person who expects punishment avoids looking closely. A person who can respond with steadiness is more willing to see the pattern. So when you notice yourself scrolling automatically, try replacing accusation with description. I am tired and looking for relief. I am avoiding a task that feels unclear. I feel lonely. I do not want the day to end. Description creates information. Information creates options. Accusation creates only pain. From that information, choose one response that addresses the actual condition. Clarify the task, message a friend, eat, sleep, take a walk. Choose a specific video and watch it. Continue scrolling consciously for 15 minutes and set an ending. The point is not always choosing the most disciplined option. The point is ending the unconscious loop. Conscious choice gradually changes identity. You stop seeing yourself as a person controlled by attention and begin seeing yourself as someone learning to direct it. That identity must remain flexible.
Do not create pride around purity.
The person who believes they have conquered distraction may become ashamed the next time they struggle. You are not finishing attention training. You are maintaining a relationship with attention in an environment that will continue competing for it. Maintenance is ordinary. That is why it works.